Hey, everybody who loves coffee. I love coffee. I know you love coffee. And if you don't love coffee, you know what? You should probably start loving coffee. And I got just the coffee for you guys. You can go to lionsofliberty.com/coffee and purchase a bag of the Morning Roar. It's a partnership we have with our friends at Anarcho Coffee. It's a delicious blend. I drink it every single morning out of my French press because I'm classy like that, and it's the best way to drink coffee. You don't have to drink it out of a French press. You can put it in your little fancy Keurig machine or your coffee maker. However you drink coffee, you can get it that way. You're going to get the coffee, so go to lionsofliberty.com/coffee. You're going to follow a link that's going to take you over there, which makes sure that we get a little credit for kicking some business that way. We get paid. It's fantastic. So make sure you're buying it through this link. And I also want to remind you that there is a code. If you join the Lions of Liberty Pride at the $10 or higher level, we have a coffee code that is going to get you 15% off every time you buy the Morning Roar. So check it out, lionsofliberty.com/coffee.
Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back to another edition of Felony Friday. That's right, your favorite criminal justice reform Friday show in all the entire world. I'm sure of it. And today's show, I got a great one for you guys. I'm going to introduce my guest in just a minute. Before I do that, I just want to remind you that on Lions of Liberty, we have a variety show format. So we have a show on Mondays that is more libertarian philosophy type stuff with Mark interviewing leaders in the Liberty movement. And on Wednesday, we have more of a laid-back, sort of shooting off the hip show hosted by Brian McWilliams. Occasionally interviews, but a lot of times it's Brian going through current events and giving his perspective, and of course the libertarian perspective on current events. And Friday, Felony Friday, where what I do here is we're talking about the failed criminal justice system. And the most popular format I have here on Felony Friday is one where I bring on individuals who have been through the criminal justice system to share their story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and to talk about obstacles they overcame. Just some incredible stories every single week here on Felony Friday. So today's episode, I can't believe it. We're getting so close to 200. This is episode 196 of Felony Friday. So that means the show notes page can be found at lionsofliberty.com/FF196. And let's start the show. My guest today on Felony Friday is Drew Cook. Drew is an addict in recovery. He has noticed in the libertarian community a seeming non-existent perspective when it comes to ending the war on drugs, the perspective that would come from a recovering addict that would have around that. One coming from the point of view of personal responsibility, really. And Drew has a passion behind this, and he's actually launched his own blog. It's called The Clean Libertarian. I'll provide notes to his blog on the show notes page. Recommend you all check it out. Drew, welcome to Felony Friday.
Thanks a lot, John. Good to be here, bud.
Yeah, man, great to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you reached out. I have had on people in the past who struggle with addiction, but we haven't really dug into like the, how a libertarian who's an addict would really look at the principles behind how libertarians attack the war on drugs. And we've talked about this a little bit in the pre-show chat, and we'll dive into it more during the show. But before we get to that, I like my audience to get a background on you, to get to know you better, what you're all about, sort of your path. So if you could first start out with just sort of letting people know where you grew up, what your formative years were like and stuff like that.
Yeah, no problem. So I grew up in Yukon, Oklahoma. It's a little suburb outside of Oklahoma City. And man, it was just my entire life. The best way that I can describe it is I never could quite fit in where I stood. No matter what I was doing, no matter what I tried to do, it just never seemed to like pull off really well. Like, so one of the things I like to talk about whenever I get asked to share my story anywhere is the fact that like when I was, my dad was a big time football jock, and like I really wanted to emulate him a lot when I was a kid. And so I tried out for football, but when you're like a chubby kid running up and down the field, it's not too much fun. So I just kind of didn't do the sports thing. I tried skateboarding, broke both my wrists, and I still can't do an ollie to this day, if you can believe that. But man, I everything I tried to do, it just never could quite fit with me. And I started getting sent to these psychiatric doctors because my parents were like, "Yeah, there's something wrong with this boy. You know, he doesn't act right." And this was around the time of the experimental behavioral medication for ADD and ADHD.
Yeah.
And
so, like, how old were you? Sorry to interrupt, but how old were you during
you're
this
good.
Yeah.
I was about 12 or 13. I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I believe. And they ran me through the usual gauntlet of medications, and they finally wound me up on one called Dexedrine. And I remember taking this pill and feeling like Superman. Like, I finally felt good. You know, I finally looked in the mirror and I was okay with that guy that I saw. Didn't stop me from acting like a weirdo. We were talking about it in before the show, but like on one of those articles I posted, I talk about sneaking downstairs and getting into my dad's carton of cigarettes. And I did that completely wired on this behavioral medication when I was a kid. And so I got it instilled in my head that in order for me to feel okay on the inside, I need something on the outside. And thus began the life of a drug addict. And so, you know, I did what I did. I chased what I chased throughout my juvenile and adult years until I finally wound up in the rooms of recovery and learned about some personal responsibility and how to work the steps. And
so just to clarify, so really taking this medication early on in your life, it made you feel like you needed something to feel normal, that you weren't able to do it without that, or am I reading that right?
No, you touched on that. It's really hard for me to describe outside of the fact that I think what it is more than anything is that I never, for whatever reason, developed really good coping mechanisms, right? So once I was introduced to something that could instantly make me feel better, regardless, it kind of became this like unhealthy coping mechanism, if that makes any kind of sense.
So how did you first get into, you know, recreational drugs or, you know, illegal street drugs, whatever you want to call it?
I remember like the first time I smoked pot, I was actually, my mom was real strict, but you know, we were Southern Baptist, and so she let me go to all these church functions, and I met a friend there, and he was like, "Hey, come stay the night at my house." And I asked my mom for permission. She said it was cool. We went over there, and he had some weed, you know, some pot, and it's the first time I smoked weed. And you know, I grew up in the real hardcore dare era, you know, like where
just
Ronald Reagan's war on drugs, just say no, all of that. Yeah, man. After school specials, and so I'm thinking that this pot is going to be like just as bad as heroin, you know, like I'm running the risk of overdose, you know, or whatever else. And
I grew up the same way, man. I had the exact same background. First time I saw pot, I thought I was seeing like heroin, honestly. Like I thought it was like just as bad. I'm like, oh my God. Like,
yeah. It's wild. The vilification that they did with that, but that particular substance. And I don't know if you had much the same thought as I did, but when I did it, and the worst it was like I had the munchies and I was like really tired and paranoid. I was like, yeah, if they're lying about this, they're lying about everything else. And I kind of maintained that. And so from that day on, I never had any kind of fear or nervousness whatsoever about trying anything that was put in front of me. And that was reflected very much so, you know, as I progressed throughout my addiction.
So you started out with marijuana, obviously. I think even people today who are, I would say advocates of the war on drugs still recognize that marijuana is probably the safest drug. But did you make your way into some harder drugs from there?
Yeah. I tried everything, and I don't want to try to like paint myself out as being some kind of like Hunter S. Thompson type of cat, but it's just I just wanted what I wanted was to not be in my own skin, right? And every avenue that I could find to get out of reality and into an altered state of consciousness or being, I chose to do that, and that took me through, I believe, every known drug that was in my neck of the woods, and so what started out as recreational drug use and having fun on the weekends turned into having fun on the weeknights, and that turned into having fun during the workday. And then what started out as just having fun ultimately ended up being about chasing oblivion, just numbing, and I don't really know if I could pinpoint, for you where that happened. I don't know if I could tell you on this day, John, it stopped being about fun. I just know that it happened. And when it happened, I really didn't see a way out, And so what ended up, what ultimately ended up happening is out here we have detox facilities and obviously jail. That's why we're here. And I went through the jail system, criminal justice system. I ended up catching some charges, caught 2 felonies for attempting to obtain CDS by forgery, which is just fancy terminology for, forging a prescription. And, the state had lots and lots of suggestions about what I needed to do to fix my life, but none of it worked.
Just curious, how did they catch you with that? Did you have an actual doctor's pad that you were forging a prescription on, or like what?
Yeah, it was something that was handed to me by people that I knew at the time, and I don't know how they got it. I don't know how they did all that, but I just remember being in the pharmacy and talking to the pharmacist and just chatting it up, like nothing's wrong. Everything's going great. Just waiting on my prescription. And I remember feeling a hand on my shoulder and hearing the words, put your hands on the counter and don't make any sudden moves. And just looking at that pharmacist, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, you're good. They kept me there. They knew what was going to go down. And, yeah.
So how much time did you end up serving, or?
I lucked out. I lucked out. The first offense, I didn't learn my lesson the first time. I got the same charge twice. The first offense, I got deferred sentence, which is just like, hey, be good. Gave me like some light community service and stuff like that. They said, be good for a certain amount of time and this all goes away. About a year later, almost to the day exactly, I caught my second charge. And then that was looking like it was going to be a lot of prison time, just so happened I had the same damn judge who last time he had told me, don't ever come back in here again. And here I was. And I don't know what the majority of your viewers, like what that demographic is like, or the listeners, but or what they believe in. But at this point in time on that second charge, I had enough of experience of going to the detox facilities and being introduced to some of the people in recovery. And they all talked about this thing called surrender, this act of surrender and what that looked like. And I remember sitting in the holding cell, waiting to go in front of the judge for the final sentencing. And I remember hitting my knees, and I don't know who or what it was I was praying to, I don't know specifically what that was. I just remember saying, whatever needs to happen here, let's just do it, and come to find out, the DA and my public defender were actually golfing buddies, and they cooked up this really sweet deal, and I got a second chance. And yeah, it was a gift. That was a gift. I got to walk free that day, and I got community sentencing, which is kind of like it's supervised probation, but it's a little bit on the lighter side, you know? So yeah, it was a good deal.
But do you still have the felon label attached to you? Will it show up on a background check?
Yes, it will. Mm-hmm. Yes, it will.
Has that impacted your ability to get employment and housing, things like that?
It's definitely affected my ability of employment. I have a daughter. I have a 10-year-old little girl. She's my world, man. I love that. Mm-hmm. That little girl. And like, you know, we just a couple months ago went and did the back to school. And, you know, one of the things I wanted to do was volunteer to come up there. They have a little local, I think they're called watchdogs. And it's just dads who volunteer their time to walk around the school and make sure nobody comes in or anything like that. And I was denied on account of my background. And that kind of sucks, man. Wow. Like I can't participate in my kid's school because of that. You know, I suspect, although I do not know, that there's been a couple of promotions I've been passed up for. I have pretty strong suspicions for that, but on account of my background. Mm-hmm. And I do know that there's definitely been at least 4 jobs that I've applied for that I was denied on the grounds of my background.
So was that a turning point for you, that second arrest, or at what point did you start to take sobriety seriously? Did you?
You know, this one of the things that happened to me, I was in jail, and I was calling my mom. At this point, I think I had like 3 months clean, right? So I'm calling my mom. My mom had, when I was out there using, she had gotten temporary custody of my daughter through the court system. And she was still my get out of jail free card, or at least I thought, you know. So I'm calling her up and I'm asking her like, hey, why isn't there money on my books? How come I'm not out of jail yet? Like, what the hell, you know? And it's all about me, I. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, let me stop you for just a moment. She said, you haven't asked me about your daughter at all. And I said, okay, well, how's she doing? She said, well, she called you today. And I don't know if you've ever been in jail, but you don't exactly get incoming phone calls. So I didn't know what she meant. I was kind of baffled. And she said, I bought her a toy cell phone and she talked to you for 15 minutes on the phone. And, you know, I kind of, that was a gut shot, man. Especially when you're in jail, you're trying to put on a front, you're trying to act really masculine and macho and all that. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't want anybody to see your weakness, but man, I broke down right then and there. You know, I couldn't take that one. And that's what kind of drove it home for me. But there's more at stake here than just my selfish ends. And so, yeah, that was a turning point that I can remember for sure.
So you're also a libertarian, right? So
correct.
At what point did the libertarian philosophy come into your life? Was this something that you had for a while before that, or?
Yeah, I think, John, I think the majority of my life, I've pretty much always been a libertarian. Mm-hmm. It was just for so long, I never knew what to call it. During the Ron Paul years, like when he was, you know, running for president, like, dude, I was not interested in politics at all. So I wasn't paying attention to that. Mm-hmm. I just knew that I didn't like the federal government. I didn't like government, period. And I was always ready to protest or, you know, get loud about being anti-war, especially, you know, anything involving with Iraq and all of that. And it wasn't until I'd say about 5 years ago that I got really turned on to libertarianism. Mm-hmm. A buddy of mine kind of said, hey man, you should check out this political philosophy. And I just kind of here and there picked up a couple podcasts, and then that turned into books. And then all of a sudden I'm reading Murray Rothbard and Mises, and mm-hmm. It's a wrap. You know,
that's crazy how it happens. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I think for me, my biggest red pill was the book, The Left, the Right, and the State by Lou Rockwell.
I haven't read that yet.
wow, it's a read. That is a read right there.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about leading up to this. One thing I definitely want to talk about with you is sort of this, how libertarians look at personal responsibility and drug use and things like that. And I mean, people who are listening to this podcast, there's people who are on the left progressives, there's people who are on the right conservatives. Obviously, there's a lot of libertarians as well. So just for those of you out there, just some background on what Drew and I are going to talk about. There are a lot of people in the libertarian movement who take a very, I would say, abrasive way to communicate the anti-war on drugs message, and just wearing T-shirts like legalize cocaine, legalize heroin, things like that, and basically just putting it all on. People can do whatever they want to do with their body, which I would agree that's true. I think you would agree that's true, but you've written I think a very compelling blog post on it that I read, and so if you could kind of expound upon your viewpoint around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally believe, without any shadow of a doubt, that every street level narcotic has a real world free market application, not just for getting completely obliterated out of your mind, but there's actual purposes for these narcotics. If there wasn't, they wouldn't be taken. That's just my opinion. However, when we start talking about these things, when we start talking about legalized recreational cocaine, like absolutely we should advocate for that. But at the same time, I think that it would do the libertarians a great deal of service if we offered some nuance along with that. And what I mean by that is, just because we advocate for legalizing every narcotic does not mean we are advocating for a normalization of drug addiction in our society. Mm-hmm. A society with rampant drug addiction problems is going to be prone to have a failing economy. As any good, healthy economy is only going to be as good and healthy as the people contributing into it. So one of the things that, we can look at as far as what would that look like for us? We here in this country have a history of legalizing a particular substance that was under the Prohibition era for so long. And I kind of delve into that in one of the posts. But I believe it was in the 1800s. Americans were drinking, I think the consumption was 8 gallons of alcohol a year per capita. And that was the booziest on record for us. The Prohibition era came along in the 1920s, and the fluctuations, and granted, it's an outlawed substance, so who's being honest about that at that time? Mm-hmm. But based upon the studies done at the time, we were still well under the worst it's ever been. And, that's to be expected, especially whenever you outlaw a particular substance. But it's on the other side of that. It's whenever Prohibition went away and alcohol became completely legal, that we see nothing coming close to the 1800s alcohol consumption of Americans. And so what I think that is a very telling indication that humans are going to always do what's best for them. Whether a substance is illegal or not will not stop people from using it. I mean, we've been 40 plus years in a war on drugs. I mean, how many trillions of dollars? We are no closer to solving this problem now than when we first began. And so, why not entertain the thought of what happens whenever we legalize this? What happens whenever we stop ruining people's lives over the possession of a plant, over the possession of anything, for what really breaks down to a mental health concern? I think that's worth looking into. A lot of people are really quick to point to Portugal, and I will too. Portugal is a wonderful, example. However, we aren't Portugal, so we can look at the successes over there, and we can hypothesize that we would see some of those similarities, but we actually have real world history in this country of prohibition and relieving prohibition. And I think that we can stand on that.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up there with comparing the United States to other countries. People do it all the time for gun control. They'll say, "Oh, look at Japan. They have banned guns and there's no crime." But you're exactly right. The United States is a very different country. There's no other country out there like the United States, and right. I don't think it's. I don't know if legalizing drugs the way that Portugal has or decriminalizing drugs the way that Portugal has would have the exact same. Of course, it wouldn't have the exact same. I don't even know if it would have a similar outcome. There might be some rough patches for a while. I'm not sure. But like the way I like to bring this up to people, especially those who aren't libertarians, is, and we're seeing it happen more and more, and it's very tragic, is we see it with overdoses. And it's really a public safety issue. And you look at people who, a lot of people are uninformed when they look at a drug addict who maybe ODs on heroin or ODs on Oxycontin or whatever. They think it's just that drug that caused the overdose. When right. I'm sure, as you know, in reality, it's actually most of the time a tainted drug, or the dosage of the drug is different than they're used to, or they just got out of prison and they haven't been taking the drug for a while and get more than they are able to for their body to process. And yeah. It's really a quality issue, and the quality issue is created by the black market. And a example of this, a very tragic example of this, happened in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago. I actually talked about it on last week's episode, so I won't go into detail, but a lot of people look at cocaine as a fairly safe drug. You don't hear about people ODing on cocaine. It's sort of a white-collar drug. People on Wall Street use it. There were 3 people who OD'd on cocaine in Pittsburgh because it was tainted with something, fentanyl, something like that. And it can happen just like that. And it is, no matter how you look at, I'm just talking to listeners out there who maybe question this. No matter how you look at illicit drugs, somebody who makes the decision to use cocaine or use heroin or use some prescription pills that they've obtained illegally, they don't deserve to die. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Anybody who thinks they deserve to die is a crazy person. So why would you not want to fix this quality issue? And the only way to do that is by bringing this out of the back alleys and legalizing it.
That's right. 100%. Currently there's no recourse for the consumer whatsoever. You buy a tainted product, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to find that drug dealer, who did it or proving it is another story altogether. However, if I'm able to walk into, let's say, a CVS and I buy a product and I have a receipt for that product, and I go home and I ingest it, and that product that I ingest or consume or whatever method that I use is different from what is labeled, I now have grounds for taking a case against them and having an advocate in the court system and letting a judge decide, because currently, man, if you OD and die, you OD and die. And it's a sad thing, especially for those of us who go into recovery. It's a reality if we see that, constantly. And you have to wonder how many of these people would still be walking around today if they were able to know 100% what dosage, what milligram, what contents were in their drug that they were using. But you also have to wonder how many of these people would still be here if they were able to sit down and have a rational, realistic conversation with a pharmacist about the drug that they were intending to purchase and consume, rather than, hey, this is good stuff, man, be careful. I mean, that's the extent that you will get from the dope house, rather than, hey, listen, if you've been taking these other medications within the last, week, or if you are dehydrated, or if you haven't eaten, like, these are the side effects that you can expect to see. And so this is a safe way to use this drug. There's a lot of net positives that could happen if legalization were to occur.
curious to get your perspective on something. I don't know if you had this experience in your past, but people refer to marijuana as a gateway drug, which I don't really like to use. I don't agree that it's a gateway drug, but I will agree that if somebody does start off using marijuana, which is where most people do start, I think, the vast majority of people who end up using harder drugs start with marijuana, and what brings them, or what can bring them to the exposure to those drugs, is they're having to buy that, on the black market. They're buying it from a shady character. And those shady characters, drug dealers, are not just going to be selling only marijuana. They're also going to be selling pills, also whatever else. So do you think that sort of does kind of the black market, because marijuana is illegal along with the other things, sort of makes it into a de facto sort of gateway drug?
I think it's just the fact that you demonize something for so long, you vilify it, and for whatever reason, somebody smokes their first bowl or their first joint, whatever the case may be, and they realize it's not such a bad thing. You've now given them a ticket into the counterculture. And so why wouldn't they pursue those ends? Like, I don't think it's a gateway drug as in it unlocks some magical, thing, but I definitely think the lack of realistic dialogue being put forth, especially to kids in school, you're setting them up for failure with that type of stuff. And if there was rational conversation happening, like, hey, weed's probably not that bad, but you should still probably wait until you're older to use it, maybe we would see a little bit of a difference there, but I strongly believe, gateway or not, all that aside, there are certain types of people who have this thing that people call addiction. There's mental markers that are present. There is definitely a certain personality type. And I don't think that it doesn't matter what their first, drug is, they're going to do what they're going to do. I can't tell you how many people I have seen walk into a meeting or elsewhere who are wringing their hands, wondering how it all happened when they just started out on a couple of Lortabs, and before they knew it, they're on heroin. So if we really want to talk about what's a gateway drug, maybe we should start looking at that type of stuff as well.
Yeah. So, and you're an advocate for the 12-step program, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, well, I guess let's just dive into, I know you talked about in one of your first blog posts, maybe it was your first one, about the reasons why you started the Clean Libertarian. If you could kind of lay out, really your passion for it and what's your vision? You could go a lot of different directions with it. I think the content's great.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. What brought me to it is actually, I started to notice a trend that whenever drug addiction got brought up, because us libertarians, we love to just argue about what the ideal libertarian landscape looks like. And anytime the topic of drug addiction and drug legislation comes along, when the question of, well, what is to become of the drug addicts gets brought up, there was no shortage of the term Darwinism. And that is, it's tough, man. It's tough being somebody who, thank God, I made it to people who could show me a better way to live. And thank God Darwinism didn't have to take effect in order for my life to change, or my family's life to change, for that matter. I think that if we were to have realistic dialogue about what we could expect in said libertarian society, free from legislation involving narcotics, that maybe we could bring more people into the fold of this movement, and maybe we could bring some more nuance to this topic as well, that hasn't yet been realized. And so that's kind of the breeding ground for the website, for the blog. I kicked the idea around for a long time before I actually did something about it, and I just kind of started doing it. More than anything, though, the ultimate end goal isn't to get everybody to come like the page or share the content. I just want to see people talk about it. I want to be able to see widespread, rational discussion, which is maybe a tall order in the liberty movement at times, but I would like to see that involving drug addiction and recovery. You know, a lot of times we like to talk about why the state shouldn't get involved in that type of thing is because people should have their ability to have self-determination and, you know, freedom of consumption of whatever they so choose. But the reality of the situation is that the state's solution, when it boils down, is to lock you in a cage, label you a felon, hammer you with tons of fines to where 9 times out of 10, you're going to be right back in prison because you can't pay that stuff. And ultimately what they're going to do is force you to go to a 12-step program, you know? So at the end of the day, the state themselves are admitting we don't have a solution. And what I'm saying is that the organic recovery process exists with monumental success across the board, and it's helping people. And it's absolutely, I don't want to give the impression that I think that that's the only way to find freedom from addiction, but it certainly helped me. And I know that there's other means and other ways, but locking people in a cage to where they could possibly die. Like our local, I think we're in our local county jail, we're up to 9 deaths this year. Over 80% of those people that died in jail were in there for the possession of a narcotic and nothing else. And that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Locking people in a cage. I like the way that Larry Sharp puts it is, I mean, unless you would do it yourself. So if you saw somebody on the street using an illegal drug, would you take them to your house and lock them in your basement for doing that? No. I mean, would anybody actually say that? No. So why are you going to use the state to do that, to do the exact same thing? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Drew, if you could just plug your site, and I don't know if you're in social media, plug anything else you need to.
Yeah. The cleanlibertarian.com. That's the site. That's where the blog posts get put up. All the links to the social media pages are there. And just come be a part of it. More than anything, if you are a libertarian and you are in recovery, please reach out to me, because I don't want to do all this on my own. I would like some help. I would like some contributing authors and stuff like that. And so I'm very open to that.
Well, I know a couple others a couple libertarians who are in recovery. So hopefully they reach out to you.
Right on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Drew. I really do appreciate it, man.
Thanks, John.
I want to thank Drew Cook once again for coming on the show and having the courage to share his story. You know, I think, a lot of the times, maybe I don't give the people who've come on this show to share their story to really open up from their heart, open up mistakes they've made in the past. They deserve all the credit, man. I'm just the guy here recording this and pushing it out to you guys, but the people making the difference on this show are my guests, and that is the friggin' truth. So I really, really, really want to encourage you to check out the Clean Libertarian. Check out those blog posts. He's got I think 9 or so up there, maybe more than that now, but he's planning to do a lot more writing. Drew is a smart guy, and he brings a very important perspective to the war on drugs, I think, as a whole, but especially looking at this from a freedom standpoint, from a what could this look like in a more free society? I think just shouting from the rooftops, legalize cocaine or legalize all drugs, that scares a lot of people. And it scares a lot of people because they can't picture what it would be like. There's a famous moment from an old GOP debate with Ron Paul. I think it was from the second time he ran in the GOP primary in 2012. And he's during the one debate, and they ask him, well, Ron, you talked about legalizing all drugs. Would you legalize heroin? Oh, we got you. And Ron pretty much goes, yeah, I would. And the crowd starts booing. And he goes, what, are you all afraid if it's legal? Are y'all afraid that you're going to start doing heroin? And I don't know, maybe people are afraid of that. I think it's completely ridiculous. The market would be, honestly, it's hard to even imagine what it would be like in this country with drugs legalized. One thing I can promise you is you would have much safer products. You would have much, much less, a vast amount fewer of overdoses, almost down to zero. And you would have less addiction. I can guarantee you of all that stuff. How everything would be organized and what people would take, I have no idea. I'm not a mind reader, and I'm not someone who plans societies. So this stuff would just work itself out. And a lot of people are very afraid of any sort of change, even if they know that over time, it would make things a lot safer and a lot better for everyone in society. So, it's an important topic, and that's why I talk about it. Not the easiest topic to really hash out with the old everyday American. But anywho, that's why you have shows like Felony Friday. That's why you should share this episode with all your friends, liberals, conservatives, progressives, moderates, all the peoples. Share this up. Send them the link to the podcatcher you're using. You can just go and share it from there. You can share it. This will be on YouTube as well. Just the audio. I don't think we'll have the video. Or you can share it on Facebook. We post this on our Facebook page, Lions of Liberty. We'll post it on Twitter. And, of course, you can always talk about this episode. Any of the stuff we talk about on Lions of Liberty, any of our episodes are always posted in our Lions of Liberty forum, along with all kinds of other stuff that we talk about there. It's on Facebook. You can find it by going to the old Facebook, punching Lions of Liberty Forum in the search bar at the top. It pops up. You click join. We look at your face. If you have a real face and not a cartoon profile picture, we probably let you in. There's one question you have to answer. If you don't answer the one question, you won't get in either. So do that. And I've rambled for long enough. One more thing. Join the Lions of Liberty Pride by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. Join it if you like this, and if you want to support us, and if you want us to, really improve this show, make it better, add more stuff to it, then guess what? We need your support. So patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for listening. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.